It's a little hot in here now. Is it just me? Any requests? Huh? I'm going to be dead by tomorrow morning. Let's see what we got here. Hi, Bob. Hi, Susan. Yeah. Let's see. How about... what would you like, Jimmy? Proclamation? Proclamation's in our set today, though.
No, I was just asking a question about it.
Who? Oh, let's do Seinfeld. Still got a little ringing going on up here, as you can tell. And I'm not doing anything. How about All Israel Shall Be Saved? Something klezmer-ish. Put a kind of a Messianic stamp on this room. Yeah. Are you guys going to attempt to dance? Wing it? Yeah? Interchangeable? Something? That one. I told a bunch of people, like everybody on Facebook, that this starts at 2. Has it changed? Probably right. That's fine with me. Israel shall be saved. Oh, Israel shall be saved. Oh, Israel, oh, Israel, oh, Israel shall be saved. Israel, be the sham. Israel, be the sham. Oh, Israel, oh, Israel, oh, Israel, be the sham. I believe with perfect faith that all the people How about a fun one to dance to? Bring your lunch in here. I'm hungry. How about Ashrei Ha'am by Steve McConnell is so much fun. Trust me. Get it. All right. Do you have it in your repertoire? Are you ready to dance, Stephanie? Yes. I just got here. Stephanie, I have something for you. Here. No excuses now. Okay, we're gonna do something a little traditional sounding. It's a song written by Steve and Sue McConnell. They're from back east. And they wrote some really amazing Messianic Jewish songs. Very heavy Jewish flavor. We like that flavor. Oh, Mark. Okay. And even if you don't know how to dance, you know you can follow the leader, which would be Rebecca, and just kind of do what she does. Well, not exactly what she does. It's just move in the same direction. The problem with Israeli circle dancing is sometimes you turn and go the other way on a dime. And I can't stand across from the leader because I get my left and right mixed up. Yeah, next to. And if they call out right, I go left because I have about 2 seconds that I need to think which is my right. It's terrible.
That's why you sing.
That's why I sing. I took up singing a couple of years ago. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Is it on here or is it not? What do you know? The higher A they knew, and then it goes into Yigdal, which is rock and roll. The higher A they knew is klezmer. Yeah. Yofi. Well, we were, but Mark said no.
Honey,
Women's fits, men's sweat. In any language, men's sweat. All right. Well, it's 1:45. What do we want to do?
More music.
Are people still eating, or
More music.
the latecomers that came in here, are people still eating? We don't know. Everything's running a little late, so we're going to run a little late on purpose. What do you think, Rabbi Hyman? What do you think? Yeah? We'll do one more. That's a break.
Slow guys are speaking. I'm out of breath doing slow.
Now I'm really thirsty.
Well, it wouldn't be on there. No, we're not doing anything from the action program. Just messing around. So you want a slow one?
Yeah, we're gonna slow one. I'll get on with the dance.
Why don't we do the dance that Becca's going to teach? We'll do Hatov Shimcha. Yeah. And that way when you get ready to teach it, they've already heard it. Yeah? Good idea. Hatov Shimcha? Okay. That sounds good. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to rehearse with all these people in the room. We're going out of order, so Mark's got to pull up tracks real quick. It's not bad. Not bad.
Lord God, we thank you for this time of worship. We thank you for Lev Shiloh and for the giftings you've given to them, God, that leads us into your presence. If we're in your presence is fullness of joy. So God, we're just grateful to be here today and pray that you would continue to reveal to us your truth, your word. As we draw close to you, we promise you would draw close to us. We pray in the name of Yeshua. Amen. So I asked this question a little earlier. I'm Highland Slobodkin, and originally Slobodkin from Ukraine. My grandparents are the Fiddler on the Roof story. It came about 1908, 1909, leaving the pogroms of Russia, the growing anti-Semitism in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and they came to the States, and I always wondered, what would it have been like if they just went to Israel instead of the States? You know, they were two promised lands back then, and they chose the Western one. And my wife's family, Marita, raise your hand in a minute. My wife's family went through the Shoah, the Holocaust. Her mother was hidden for 2 years by a Catholic family because God appeared to the mother in a dream and told her to hide the family. So she hid my mother-in-law and Rita's mother, Rita's aunt, my mother-in-law's sister, and their parents. The four of them, as a family, survived the war in an attic for 2 years in Kumniska, in Galicia, southeastern Poland. We actually went there a couple years ago and went into the attic where they lived. Another very long story. It was a beautiful story. And her father was in 4 concentration camps and survived, was finally liberated from Mauthausen in Austria. So, and I was raised a Zionist. Everything we did as a child was for Israel, the nation Israel. I was born in 1947, right before the UN formed the two-state solution. By the way, two-state solution is nothing new. It's been around a very long time. The first one officially in 1947, November 29th. But the Arabs didn't want 2 states. They want the Jews out, and it's the same today. So I had all kinds of things prepared. Let me ask the question again. Is there anyone here that's not involved in something Messianic? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, welcome. Glad you're here. I asked Martha, I met Martha earlier, I said, why are you here? She said, I'm just drawn to something about this Messianic thing. And I told her, I said, you know, Jesus was Jewish. He could be considered the first Messianic. Yeah. So if you're drawn to this kind of music, you're drawn to the minor keys, this Middle Eastern flavor, talking about the Jewishness of the gospel, you're relating to Israel and maybe a new way, a different way, because really that's the heart of God. And this Messianic thing, you know, we've been sort of fringe for a long time, but God is doing great work in the hearts of Jews and Gentiles all over the world to bring a new understanding of Jewish roots, Christianity, and these kinds of things. I want to share a little story. My wife and I just got back from Israel on Thursday. We were gone a month. We led a tour for 2 weeks, and then we stayed another 2 weeks, rented a car, and drove around visiting family and friends. So we just got back Thursday night, and then I preached Saturday morning at our church service at our Messianic congregation in Newcastle, Washington.
Were you awake?
Just checking, see if you're that. And then again on Sunday morning, the Sunday was Shavuot. The 24th was Shavuot, which became known as Pentecost later on in Latin church days, Penta meaning 50. And most oftentimes, we celebrate Shavuot on a different day than the rest of the world because we keep the biblical calendar. But this day, it was the Pentecost Sunday, was the same as Shavuot all over. So there were Jews and Christians, some believing in Yeshua, some not, all celebrating this holiday. And then I was up all night Sunday night, and then we flew here Monday morning, left the house at 5:30 a.m. So I'm still sort of jet lagging. So I hope I'm a little coherent at least. One of our tours to Israel a couple years ago, we joined a group called the World Christian Gathering of Indigenous Peoples. And this is the World Christian Gathering of Indigenous Peoples. Is an international organization of different tribal groups with different languages. So if you're a tribe or part of an indigenous ethnic group somewhere in the world, your tribe can join this World Christian Gathering of Indigenous Peoples. And every 2 years, they have a world conference in another tribal area. And they've been all over the world, been going about 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. So, I want to say 2008, Rita, I think it was?
I think Zion was 1, so he's almost 8.
So 2008, I think, we went to Israel. And our group joined for about 10 days this World Christian Gathering group. And the reason they did that is because they considered the Jews a tribal people. Originally 12 tribes. And very nomadic, sheep herders, goat herders, cattle herders back in the early days. And so they hosted the International Christian Indigenous Peoples Organization hosted it in Israel this one year for the first time. And we were in the Galilee at a place called Church of the Beatitudes, where some people think maybe Yeshua preached what we call the Sermon on the Mount. But and we were there, and they were pairing up the different groups. And so some guy said to me, "So your group, I think we were 33 people in our tour group. You go with the Papuans." So there was a group of about 100 from Papua New Guinea, and they all were about 5 feet tall, and they all wore these bright red T-shirts with very dark skin. And so we were there with them in this amphitheater type area, and the translator, who was translating from English to Papuan and Papuan English, he said, "So the Papuan pastor preach, and then you preach." And I said, "So what am I preaching about?" He said, "Oh, you know, indigenous peoples." Okay, great. So I sat down, and I was just listening to the Papuan pastor preach, and the guy was translating, and he was having a great time, and then all of a sudden he was done, and he called me down, and I'm totally clueless. I don't know what I'm going to say. I've got, R33, and there's 100 of them, so about 130 people waiting for me to come with the Word of God. And I opened up my Bible to Genesis chapter 12, and I read Abram, where God says, "I will bless them who bless you, and he who curses you, I will curse, and through you..." Okay, let me just back up 1 second. I was telling the story about God had a plan from the beginning. He chose a man named Abram. And through Abram, God was going to bless all the peoples of the earth. I started reading the scripture. "And through you, Abram, all the families of the earth will be blessed." And these Papuans jumped out of their seat and started yelling and screaming. And I thought, what did I say? And I realized that they were the families of the earth that had been blessed through Abram.
Wow.
Through the faith of Abram, became Abraham. And they were in Israel for the first time, and they were just blown away that they were connecting with this Jewish root. And here was a Jewish guy preaching, and they were in Israel, and they just lost it completely. But it was a beautiful picture of what God is really doing in the world today. He's connecting Gentiles. He's connecting the Goyim, the nations, with the first nation. We can call ourselves First Nation peoples. Indigenous people group called the Jews, because of one man's faith that God decided, "I'm going to use you." Now, God didn't, if I were God, I would have chosen the Chinese to bring my message to the world, or just a couple years ago, East Indians, their population surpassed China. Do you know that? China's at 1.2 billion and India's about 1.3 billion people. And I would have chosen a large people group, but instead God chose the Jewish people. Why? He said, I didn't choose you because you were the greatest in number. In fact, you were the fewest in number. I chose you because I love you. And because of the oath I made to your forefathers. Deuteronomy 7:7. Because God uses the base things of the world and the weak things to confuse the wise. And every time I get up to the pulpit, every Shabbat morning, every Saturday morning, I say, God, I'm not sure I'm the right man for the job, and I don't think I have the gifts that are really necessary, but somehow God uses it. And I think it's because we come weak, because God doesn't use the strong. I mean, look at the heroes of Scripture. The only one that seemed really strong and tall and beautiful was Saul, and he messed up big time because people wanted a king. But who was David? He was the youngest. He was the shepherd boy. He was, they called him ruddy. And but all it took was one stone, to take down the giant. Why did God choose Jerusalem? And people could say, well, I don't know. Why did God choose Jerusalem? Ezekiel 5:5. So I gave you Deuteronomy 7:7. Another one, Ezekiel 5:5. God says to the prophet, I've set Jerusalem at the center of the nations, with all lands surrounding her. This was God's plan. Why did God choose the Temple Mount? I mean, how did the temple end up on that place? Well, that was the place, Moriah, Mount Moriah, or Moriah in English. That little section of hillside is where Abraham went up to sacrifice Isaac in Genesis 22. He never had to sacrifice him. God provided a ram. Later on, in I think it's First Chronicles 19. Give me 1 second here. It must be 2 Chronicles 20. I can tell you the story, but I think the reference is good too. No, that's Jehoshaphat. So it must be back in 1 Chronicles. Anyone get 1 and 2 Chronicles mixed up besides me? It is. It's 1 Chronicles 21. So God tells David, the king, to go up to the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite and sacrifice there. And David looks up and there's an angel standing on the threshing floor. And it says the angel was towering over Jerusalem with his sword drawn over the city. I don't know about you, but I picture an angel about 500 feet tall, and the sword is over the city. Because if it's just a normal-sized angel like you and me, and the sword was drawn, it wouldn't be over anything but a little piece of ground. But the sword was drawn, it says, over the city. And David looks up, and he is fearful and doesn't want to go up there. But God says, do it anyway. So David goes up and finds Ornan, who owns the threshing floor. The threshing floor is where they would take the wheat and take the oxen, and they would, pull the big logs or the rocks over the wheat, and they crush the wheat, and then they take the winnowing forks, and the threshing floors were always on a hillside where the wind was blowing, because they could throw it up in the air, and the wind would catch the chaff and blow the chaff away, and the grain would fall to the ground. That's the winnowing fork. Throw it up, blow the chaff away, and the grain falls to the ground, and they can take the grain, grind it up, and make flour out of it. So it's obvious that Ornan sees this angel, and he's freaking out. His sons see the angel, and they're hiding, right? And David goes up, and he says, I want to sacrifice. Ornan is so freaked out, he said, look it, not only can you sacrifice, I'll give you the threshing floor, I'll give you the oxen, I'll give you the logs, I'll give you everything you need, just do your thing and let me get out of here. That's paraphrase. And David says, no, I will not sacrifice to the Lord that which costs me nothing. So he actually pays Ornan 600 shekels of gold and buys his threshing floor. Now, why is that important? Because later on, in 2 Chronicles, I think it's chapter 3, just a minute. Yeah, 2 Chronicles 3, it says, Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to his father David at the place that David had prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So the Temple Mount is the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, and that's where the temple was built. So it's as though we have if I were to rip that page out of here, say I could hold up the title deed to that threshing floor. David bought it, owns it. So we have this discussion, who owns the land? You know, the Palestinians are trying to say, actually Arafat used to say that the Palestinians, really they were descendant of the Jebusites, which were the people group that David conquered in Jerusalem. That was a fabrication, of course. There was no connection to the Palestinians. In fact, the Palestinians are Arab peoples from all over the place, and Arafat himself was from Egypt. So there's no connection to the Jebusites. But God chose this land. Why did God choose Jerusalem? We don't know why, but God chose this piece of real estate. It says in the book of Psalms, the Lord does as he pleases. So why did he choose Abraham? Why are some of us Jewish and some of us are Gentile? It's just God's plan. And so we have some Gentiles who want to be Jewish, right? And I tell them, look, if all the Gentiles became Jewish, we couldn't have one new man. One new man are Jews and Gentiles. That is the glory of God on the earth. And we get to participate together. Now granted, it says in Ephesians chapter 2 that the one new man are citizens of the Commonwealth of Israel. It doesn't say that the Jews join the church, or the Jews join the nation, and the nations join the Jews. And in Acts chapter 15, we have this amazing discussion. Basically, they're saying, what do you do with a Gentile who accepts Yeshua? What do you do with a Gentile who gets saved? Today, because there's been such a transition, the question is, what do you do with the Jew that gets saved? When they're in the church, like a Jewish person is an anomaly. But that's changing. Today, there are more Jewish people who believe in Yeshua since the time of Yeshua himself. And the church today looks more like the early church, if I can even use that term, because they weren't even called the church until Antioch, and that was maybe 20, 30 years later. Who knows, or maybe more than that. Because there are Jews in the church, and we're here, and we're not going away. And when my wife and I lived in Israel in 1971 to 72, we couldn't find a Jewish believer. Today, there's maybe 150 congregations or more, and depending who's counting, between 10 and 20,000 Israeli believers in Yeshua. Then there's revival going on, and they're on the streets, and they're printing books in Hebrew, and they're on television, and just recently a young woman named Shai Sol was on Kochav Haba, which is literally translated the future star. It's like a star is born, or what's the other one? Idol, American Idol, and she's a Messianic Jew. And they told her, don't mention your faith when you go for the interview, because they'll probably just not take you. And she couldn't not mention her faith, and she did. She gave her whole testimony, and they were so impressed with her that the Kochav Haba organization used her to promote the whole program. And when we were in Israel a couple weeks ago, she came and she sang, did a little mini concert for our tour group. And so things are changing. Things are changing all over the world. And are you Jackie? Yeah. So I got a voicemail from Jackie a couple weeks ago, And she said something like, "I'm so excited. I found out in Foursquare Messianic, and I just want to learn more." And we're hearing that all the time from lots and lots of people. So I have a lot I could share, but I think that's probably good for now. Just wondering if anybody had any questions. We talked about, we had sort of put together kind of a schedule. We're doing this for 4 hours. We have like a 2-hour time slot. We want to kind of like repeat it again for those who maybe missed the first half. But I think this is kind of play it by ear time, and or play it by the Spirit time. Also, a couple of people I want to introduce. Danya Greenberg is here. Could you come up a minute?
Yes, sir.
Danya Greenberg is the main protagonist, if I could use that term.
Sign and wonder? I know the sign and wonder.
In getting the first truly Messianic Bible published. And really. And I've been telling our people it's my new favorite Bible. And I just want to get it on Bible Gateway here. So
We're already in talks with Bible Gateway. Praise God.
I emailed them a couple of weeks ago.
I know you've got them all checked up.
They didn't get back to me though.
Oh, no, they're not going to tell you. They're going to talk to me.
So tell us.
Praise God. Thank you, Lord. Praise you, Lord. You are awesome and worthy to be praised, and we live in amazing times. This is an amazing time in history, Lord, and we give you all the glory.
Amen.
We thank you, Lord, that you have taken an entire generation of Jewish believers, Lord, born out of the Jesus movement, born out of the hippie movement. Now they become PhDs, and they've joined together to build a translation that honors your name, that's outside denominational preferences, Lord God, and truly sticks as close to the Hebraic understanding as we can fathom, Lord God. Father, I thank you so much for Helen Slovakin and his beautiful wife, Rita. I thank you, Lord, for all the saints here, Lord God. I'm just going to call them saints. I realize we call them Kedoshim in our Bible. I get that, Lord. But honestly, these are saints. These are children of the Most High that have given their lives for the salvation of Israel. And as a young woman who's watched them for 20 years now give everything they have for the salvation of Israel, we now see the fruit of their labor in congregation after congregation being born throughout the U.S., Lord God, and in Israel. And we give you all the honor and all the praise and all the glory. We thank you and bless you in Yeshua's name. Amen. The reason it's so exciting to be here, aside from getting the great privilege of talking in front of people who've been doing this a whole lot longer than me, who've been believing God a whole lot longer than me, we have seen, our calling as a people, as a Jewish people. My name is Danya. I married a Jewish guy. He became a rabbi. We started a congregation. I have 3 Jewish kids. They all follow the Lord. And God commissioned us to put together the Tree of Life version of the Bible. Now, it started with just a desire to have a Bible for children. But what ended up happening, because do you realize that the entire Messianic movement grew up for a generation with no Bible for the kids? So when kids read the words Jesus Christ, they don't automatically change it to Messiah Yeshua the way adults do, right? We've been using all kinds of Bibles for years, and we superimpose that name, Messiah Yeshua, for Jesus Christ. But kids don't do that. So the goal was to build something for them. And then what ended up happening is, so I went to one organization after the other. I did the crazy thing. I walked over to other organizations that weren't talking to each other and asked them all to help our kids. And so kind of like a bar mitzvah, where the relatives don't really get along, but they'll do it for the kids. You ever seen that? You ever been to a wedding where you know the relatives really are crazy about each other, but they'll be there for the kids? Our community really came together for our kids, and in the middle of all that, it ended up healing our community. And we have a real synergy and a love for God that's changing the world now. So the Jews are kind of doing what we were first created. Why are the Jews here, by the way? Why are we here all the way to, what is this? What is happening? The Jews are coming to faith. Do you know that in America, 30%, they did a Pew study, and 30% now of Jewish people don't have a problem with the fact that you can be Jewish and believe in Jesus. Mm-hmm. We live in a new world. Mm-hmm. It is not when we started this Messianic renewal. It was, they said they couldn't find another Jewish believer. Now, and do you realize that 96% of Jewish people that come to faith in a church? You realize that, right? It's the job of the church to show the love of Israel so strongly that Jewish people are drawn by the power of God.
Amen.
Drawn by the power of God. We wouldn't be here if Christians hadn't led us to Messiah. And now, instead of being traitors to our own people, we're now do you get it? We're carrying the ark on our shoulders again. Do you realize the Jewish people are doing as a people what they've been called and preserved by God to do in this century, and created a translation from scratch? That's like amazing. So, I wanted to show you some cool things about the translation. You notice in the Jewish book order, and the end of Chronicles is much more exciting and explosive and encouraging for Jewish people than the end of Malachi. Do you realize how hard it is for Jewish people to turn the page from Malachi, where the last word is either curse or destruction, to the end of, I love it when I bring all my toys with me because I can't get to them all, but let me just share what it says in the end of Chronicles, because I hope it will encourage you. Because if you would like Jewish people to turn the page and find Messiah, wouldn't this be a great way to lead them right to the good news? Now, in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, fulfilling the word of Adonai by the mouth of Jeremiah, you know where it talks about the new covenant? Praise God. Adonai stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia so that he sent a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, Adonai, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever among you of all his people may go up, and may Adonai his God be with him. It has always been God's plan, since Simeon spoke that prophetic and amazing word with the baby Yeshua in his arms, that Yeshua came, right, the glory of Israel and to be a light to the nations. It's always been about Jew and Gentile, one in Messiah. May have taken us a while to figure it out, but it's always been about that. So I brought you a treat today. You can look up the text if you want to on your phone. You can come and check out and see our Bibles at the table. But if you have your phone, does anybody here have the Bible app on their phone? You know, the little brown one? Has everybody got that one? We've had 7 million chapter reads of our TLV, and nobody even knows we're here yet. We haven't even done any major advertising, and 7 million times people have opened up chapters on over 500,000 devices in 198 countries. Wow. There's a great interest in the Word of God from a Jewish perspective. That's really astounding. It's okay, so I brought you a little treat. Where did I put my portfolio? Yes. Our Bible is filled with Jewish art. How is Jewish art different than Christian art? Does anybody know? Has anybody ever studied biblical art? In biblical art, a lot of times you'll see when someone is anointed or holy, how do we see them? They have a what on their head? They have a halo. And how are their eyes? Downcast, more than likely, or they're, right, but usually down. How are their knees? Bent. How's their posture? Humble. It's a beautiful picture of humility before Messiah, but it's not the picture of the holy moment when God enters the room and things change. Right. That's what we believe, those of us who believe that the power of God's Spirit moves and changes. It's God's Spirit that draws all men to himself. So in a Jewish Bible, I brought you these are original hand drawings. These are the originals I brought. And I brought 3 that aren't even in the Bible yet. So if someone would help me open this up, can I have somebody help me? This is so moving because when God is moving, has anybody ever seen a move of God in a room cause an eruption? Has anybody seen that? We see the power and presence of God change things. Now, is everybody in the room happy about it? No, come on. You want to let's get serious. Is everybody in the room usually happy about it? No. When God really moves, you've got the people that get it. God, you're here. You're changing my heart. You're saving my life. You're renewing my strength. And then you've got people who are, what? What's going on with them? And then you have people that doubt and speak negatively. Don't ever be discouraged that God isn't in control in a situation where his fire falls and he begins to change hearts and minds. And so this Bible is really cool because in Jewish art, we show all those faces. We show all those faces. So this this is the picture I wanted to, okay, so how would you like to see a brand new picture that hasn't been shown yet? And this is from the book of Daniel. Who are the three guys that dance in the fire? Shep. Right, okay, got it? And Yeshua in the midst of it. This is the new picture. I'm going to leave these out so you can see. Actually, if somebody else wants to show these around, that would be great. Anybody who'd like to. Because I think that that one isn't, these are ones, okay, don't put your fingers on the pencil. There you go. These ones aren't in yet. This one is, though. Look at this one. We actually believe that Yeshua became, that the Torah unraveled into a man. That's the book of Isaiah. And Yeshua actually becoming the living Torah. This is the original picture that the artist did. We have 85 pictures in this Bible. Isn't that just astounding? I mean, can you imagine? Our kids are out there believing in superheroes, and we've got Jesus. Hello? That's a supernatural move of God. Now what about what's the most famous picture in the Bible ever? Do you know? The Last Supper. Okay. Now, how many people have been to a place where you actually saw the Last Supper painted on a mural, and it had leavened bread and lobsters on it?
Right.
I actually went to a church one time. There were lobsters on the table. That was the dinner. I was like, wow. I mean, there's like, okay, and then there's like, wow, you know? And so I was watching but seriously, people don't know because they don't know. It's not because they don't want to. It's because they just don't know. So what if we showed the world the Last Supper as it would be Israel style?
Yeah.
What if we showed the world what it would be like to sit around and enjoy the matzah and to break the shmur matzah when he breaks the bread and blesses it? I mean, isn't that like astonishing?
Yeah.
The way we can change and reorient people to a Jewish Messiah isn't because it makes him more Jewish or makes any of us more saved. Recognizing your Jewish roots does not make you more saved. No. But it does help you understand that if God didn't give up on them, he's not going to give up on you.
Yeah. Amen.
We're a sign and a wonder to the end of the earth that God hasn't done with the Jewish people. Yeah. So here are the two pictures. Yes, okay. We talked about grafted in. We talked about grafted into the Jewish olive, right, into the, how much more? Who'd love to read that scripture from Romans about the Gentiles being grafted into the Jewish root? How can you start a conversation about God? Show people this picture and start the conversation. That salvation is really for all of us. And so now I'm going to be, you could get me here all day here. I could stay here all day, but I'll try to pull it together. I have two I really want to show you because I'd like your opinion about them, but I just have to keep them off camera because I'm not allowed to show them yet. This is, what's that the picture of? When Yeshua is immersed, right? Now, can I ask you a question? Do you love the expression of the people behind him? You can go ahead and pass this one back. This is a new one, actually. This is a brand new one. And just don't put your hands on the pencil, and my son will watch. Now I'm going to talk to you about these two last pictures because I think they're incredible and I would like some feedback about them. We won't be showing these on the internet until after August. But I feel like they're incredibly important. When you see Yeshua on the cross, when you picture his last hours, and you picture him on the cross, what does it look like to you? What image has been burned in your mind? And when was the earliest you remember hearing or seeing the cross? Can you think about it? Was it Sunday school? Well, for most Jewish people, it was visiting their Christian friends at their church. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, we weren't sure about propagating that image of him being on the tree because it's been used to really hurt Jewish people. They haven't understood it. So we wanted to get it from a different angle. So we had a great idea. We did it from Yeshua's eyes. So instead of showing him on the tree, we're showing him looking at the people who are looking at him. And this picture is absolutely astonishing to me. I hope that this reaches a Jewish heart to let them know that God is looking and that he paid the price, and that by his stripes we are healed. Can you imagine looking at it from his eyes? So often we try to humanize God instead of realizing that he's looking through and to every one of us to try to lead us home to him. Now, this picture wouldn't be fun at all. It would be really, really hard to see if you didn't see the ascension. Would you like to see that one?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll wrap it up. And this is my favorite. Look. This just does it for me. Look. Look at the ascension. Look at the joy. When you come to Messiah and he rises from the dead, there is phenomenal joy and peace and grace and love and acceptance. Isn't that, come on, seriously. Do you not just want to put yourself right there? Do you not really want to be one of the people who gets it? I mean, this picture just blows my mind. But the joy on their faces is just off the chain. It's just off the chain. So in sharing, and I'll let you pass this one over here so that I don't miss anybody. I don't want to take up any more time. Harlan's been so lovely to me. I suffice to say this. The Tree of Life version is a new version of the Bible. There's less than 10 in the history of the world that have been vetted by an entire team of 32 PhDs. Never before we had Jewish scholars. This is a move of God. And Pastor Jack Hayford is a great friend of this project and has been loving and gracious and kind to us and supportive and opened up door after door for us to share this good news. But the good news just isn't for us. The good news is that we have the gospel of Messiah Yeshua, and it's going to change the world. And revival pushes back judgment, and God's not done with America. And the Jewish people are going to come to faith, and they're coming more and more again and again. And we all get to be part of what God's going to do in the earth. Now is the time. The field is white now. Not soon, now. My brothers that have been laboring and sisters that have been laboring in the field all this time, they're seeing the fruit of it now. And I just want to say thank you. Because I appreciate getting to grow up under such phenomenal leadership as the Slovakians and the Foursquare Messianic groups here. Thank you.
So how much are they?
The Bibles are on sale for $60, 2 for $50. Normally they're $69 on Amazon, and these are the first. We've only got 5,000 copies in the whole world that are out there, and it's just an amazing time because we just put them out. So God bless you.
Question over here.
Are you going to make copies of those pictures?
Of the pictures, we have copies of the Passover picture, copies of the Word Became Flesh, and copies of the Grafted In. And all of those are available for sale on our website, or if you want to come and see us. They make beautiful art for your synagogue. But I'm telling you, if the translation, Diana, if the translation wasn't enough of a reason to get it, get one of these Bibles with the artwork, open it up to artwork, sit at Starbucks and start a conversation. We've never had a chance to really share from a Jewish perspective, and you're just going to love it. It's got 100 Hebrew words in it, 150 about. We tried to not over-Judaize it. We're not here to turn Gentiles into Jews. We're here to show that Jews and Gentiles can be one in Messiah.
Amen.
That's what we're here for. So, good question?
Yeah, so
Thanks.
what's exciting for me is I know about half the translators. They're friends.
Yeah.
And they're Messianic scholars and Jews who highly respected and trusted, and it's a very good translation. Any other questions about anything you've heard so far today? Any comments? Okay. I wanted Jack Flournoy. What?
I was just invited not too long ago to the Jewish thing from Long Beach State College where they had a speaker who introduced the Jewish people to the New Testament. They were all Jewish people in there, and she helped write, I don't know if she helped write that book or not, but she added to, she input the Jewish customs in it. And it was amazing. It really was an eye-opener for people to understand.
And then so he wants to evangelize and to.
You were introduced to a Messianic Jewish person.
He just got saved.
You just received the Lord
He
recently.
received the Lord 3 months ago. And my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law had introduced me to his friend who just got saved, and he is Jewish. And he is wanting to share the gospel to his people. And he told me that he gave them the New Testament, and they said, "No, I'm Jewish, I don't want to read the New Testament." And he was rejected several times, and he's asking me on how to share the gospel to the Jewish. And I said, "No, I don't have an idea, but this is what we do. You know, as Gentiles, we love them, we serve them, we are hospitable to them, and we share the love of Jesus. And that's all we do, so I don't know how. So that's why I'm here."
So we're not here to tell you how to share the gospel with the Jewish people, especially. Well, that is part of our mission. But I would say, I'll give you my card. You can talk to me, talk to Sammy, talk to any number of people here. He's a new believer. He needs to be discipled. He needs to learn what it means to be a Jew who believes in Jesus. You know? Yes. And so before you leave, you got my card. We can connect with him. It's because the gospel has been distorted for thousands of years, and that unfortunately many well-meaning and many what's the opposite of well-meaning? Those who were purposely against the Jews have done things to the Jewish people in the name of Christ that has caused most Jewish people to think that Christians hate them and want to kill them. So most Jewish people don't want to have anything to do with Jesus. For me, I was searching. I was looking for answers, life's answers. I was looking for meaning and purpose in life. I was looking for truth. Actually, I even called it universal truth. I was looking for that. So when I first heard the gospel, it answered questions for me. But most of my family don't care at all. I was going to say they don't give a rip, but yes, we'll talk some more. So Jack Florida has been a part of the March of Remembrance. Ted Pierce had a vision years ago, and it started off in Germany, where they actually took 6 German cities and formed a Star of David with these cities, 6 points, and they actually walked from city to city. And you know what year that was? Do you remember?
That was about 8 years ago.
8 years ago. I was going to say 10. It's about 8 years ago. And this movement has grown, and it's in many cities. It's in most major cities across the U.S. and around the world now. So I want to give Jack a few minutes to tell us what's going on, and then the recent honor that you received.
Oh. Is there a timekeeper? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll keep you time.
I yield back my 5 minutes. No, you tell me how much is 5 minutes. Because the story is quite exciting, and so it is. If I tell the whole story, I have a lot of fun doing it, and I hope that you would enjoy it as well. So now we're going to do it in 5 minutes. When we recently had this March of Remembrance and Holocaust Memorial service, I had people coming, and they were going to be speakers. And whenever you're in charge of something like this, like Highland is right now, and you hand the microphone, do you ever get nervous when you hand the microphone to somebody that you don't know?
You can stand next to them.
Okay. Just briefly for us personally, every year at our Holocaust Memorial time, Jan and I would go to the local conservative synagogue for the Yom HaShoah service. And 2 years ago, we went, and there were only about 22 people there. There was a rabbi and a few old people, and had their service. And a few years before that, we'd been there, and there were 150 people there. So it was a really, the 5 of the 22 were us visitors. And I was left there very upset, and it bothered me terribly, because there was no representative from the civil community, there were no pastors there were no Christians, there was nobody there to support the Jewish people in this time of remembrance. And it troubled me greatly. Then in January of that year, I was at the rabbi's conference in Orlando, and I did know Ted Pierce before that, but learned more about his March of Remembrance, and he had become involved in Europe, and the Lord inspired us to do our own, and so we did that in Temecula. In 2014 was our first one, and this year was our second one. And so I thought, my concept was that I would, if I could get some churches together and have a Yom HaShoah service, if we could do a decent job, then maybe next year the Jewish people would join us. And so that was my plan. And of course, my plan was not as big as God's plan. So that was our objective. That's what we started to do. As a courtesy, I called the 4 little synagogues in our area, and I left a message. I didn't talk to anybody. I just left a message. And I said, this is who I am, and we're going to have a Holocaust memorial service, and I just wanted to let you know about it. And so I was driving home from work, and I got a call, and a big voice on the phone says, "Are you Jack Flournoy?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he says, "Is this true what you're doing? Are you doing a Holocaust memorial service?" And then I started getting nervous. He said, "My name's Rabbi Schwimmer." And he has a big booming voice, and so I didn't know what was coming next, because being in the Messianic movement, it cannot all be good. Sometimes things go bad. And I said yes. I described to him what we were doing, and he said, "This is wonderful, this is great. Any way I can be involved." Wow. And I said, "There sure is." So started our conversations. In our first event, we had one synagogue involved. Rabbi Schwimmer came, and he chanted Ma'ale Rachamim, which is God of mercy, and he recited Kaddish for us, and we had beautiful music, and the most important part I want to talk about is the fact that we led a congregation for 10 years. And like I'm sure the Highland Rita and everyone here who's in leadership, our heart's desire is, what can we do to reach the Jewish people? We have this wonderful gospel, we have this wonderful life that we live. How can we reach out to them when they've been so hurt and so damaged and so... Anyway, you all know the stories. They've been hurt so bad that you can't even hardly talk to them. You can't find them sometimes. In our community, they're dispersed all over the place. You don't even know where to go. You can't even go to a deli. We don't have a deli. So how are you going to go meet them? Well, Starbucks is a reasonable place, but it's not like when you have a deli to go to. You can't do it in the synagogue. You know? So how do you even meet them? So this is the important part. By doing this, we brought together Holocaust survivors and had testimonies. We had someone from the Israeli Consulate General. He was our main speaker. We had a county supervisor who was Jewish, who lost family in the Holocaust. And so it was a whole 2-hour service. You have a march, and then there's the 2-hour service. But Danya mentioned, what's it like when God shows up?
Right.
What's it like? You know, I hope all of you have been in services where you went home and you had to tell somebody about it because the presence of God was so there that you thought maybe you saw the pillar of fire, you know, or at least the cloud of smoke, and he was there. And you experienced the love of God like never before. We had this 2-hour service. We did not preach the gospel. We did not tell them they were all lost and undone and needed to be saved. But for 2 hours, they sat in the presence of God. It was so wonderful. And some of you were there, experienced it, like we did. Every time I even tell a story, I start getting emotional again. Yep. Because it's so wonderful. So The end of the story is that at the end of the service, we're starting to file out, and here comes Rabbi Schwimmer. He's big. It's kind of like you, Steve. Big guy walking out. And he comes up to me, and he's got tears coming down his cheeks. And he said, "You know, Jack, this was anointed by God." All of my ministry years, that was the culmination of it.
Yep.
To have the rabbi said that he experienced the love of God. This was anointed by God. So the rest of our lives, well, I can't say for Jay, but for me, the rest of my life is going to be focused on that kind of ministry.
Yep.
Because now, even though in the congregation, when we had the congregation, it was really hard. We'd do all of our holidays and everything. We'd always have one or two not yet believing Jewish people, but to have a 20-30% of your audience experience the love of God like that, that's going to open doors.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how long that's going to take, but they came back the second year, and all three synagogues were involved this year.
Yep.
And so we're looking forward to next year, making plans already. We're going to draw in, we're going to make a special effort to get young people involved for next year. Get the young people where they can pass it on to the next generation. Thank you for the time. We have some flyers. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and, if people want one. Is that? Yes, and I'm hot on the tails of Jeff and John here, so that we can help to organize one in Orange County, South Orange County. And after that, who knows where. But for next year. So.
Do you want to show the video? I can do it without sound, but.
That was more than 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, so, thanks, Jack. So every year we go to our local JCC Jewish Community Center, and there's a Holocaust memorial, a statue there, and then we walk over to the synagogue, which is about a 5-minute walk away from the JCC, and have a service there. And the March of Remembrance is so important because we don't want people to forget the Holocaust. And I'll just say something else, but my wife says, my wife Rita.
See how she did that?
She's used to doing that. We'll be married 47 years in August.
That's what I was going to say. So, yes, we got married, well, we met in 1967. I was 17 years old, and it was love at first sight. And my mother was not really happy about this guy with long sideburns and a little ponytail. So she took us to the rabbi, and the rabbi said, "They're young and they're in love, let them get married." So 10 months later, we were still young, and we were still in love, and we got married, and the rest is history. We've learned a lot of things, sometimes the hard way, but we have been blessed. But I have some things that I want to say. We actually came to the Lord in 1970 in Switzerland with the privilege of being with Dr. Francis Schaeffer and his wife Edith. They opened up their home, and we were searching for truth, as my husband said, and when they welcomed us in, they treated us as if we were Abraham and Sarah that just walked out of the Bible and opened up their hearts and their homes. So yes, it was in the home of Gentile Christians that we received Yeshua, Jesus our Messiah. And I love to tell that to people who are believers. Not so easy to say it to people who are Jewish. And I just told my daughter this morning over the phone that sometimes I feel like I'm almost schizophrenic. I live in two worlds. We just came back from Israel. We speak Hebrew. My husband is more fluent than I am. Usually I'll speak Hebrew and people will answer me in English because it's been a long time since we studied Hebrew. But one thing that's coming to my mind is a saying that we learned at L'Abri, and it was, I don't know who wrote it, but it said, "How odd of God to choose the Jews, but not as odd as those who choose the Jewish God and hate the Jews."
So I grew up with a lot of trauma. As Hyland said, my parents were Holocaust survivors. 99% of their friends were also survivors. I grew up right in this neighborhood, not this neighborhood, but Los Angeles, in the Borscht Belt, by Fairfax. I went to Fairfax High School. You did too? Are the other Fairfax grads? I graduated in 1968. And so I grew up with what I say, I have a lot of trauma in my DNA. And as Hyland said, we went to Poland 2 years ago. It was the first time I'd ever been to Poland to meet the people who actually opened up their home and rescued my family. So we went with 3 generations, with Hyland and I, our 3 children, one of their spouses, our son-in-law, and 3 grandsons, little ones. And we all came in the opposite spirit. Like, what is the opposite spirit of trauma? Which I consider love, acceptance, generosity, blessing. We went to bless them. So what I want to tell you is, well, not so much our testimony, which is a long story in itself, is that most people, I think Dana was saying, most of the people who are leaders in the Messianic movement, and that's all over the world, whether it was Jews for Jesus or whether it was Eitan Shishkoff, people that are leaders in Israel. Ophir Amitai was studying yoga in India and had a vision of the Lord, and he came to the Lord. That most Jewish people don't go from sitting in a synagogue thinking, what must I do to be saved, to coming to receive that most Jewish people don't even think they need to be saved. So what I want to say is that in 1967, actually it was the year I met my husband, that I believe God did something incredible. And what was really incredible is that Israelis were able to go into the city of Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years. And has anybody ever been to Israel or gone into Jerusalem? When you travel as we have for the last month in Israel, it's like it's seeing prophecy come alive. You're seeing people from the north, like Russia, former Soviet Union, and people from the south, as far as South Africa, from the east, as far as India. There are Ethiopians, there are all kinds of Jewish people, and here we are in the West. It's not so easy for American Jews to leave all the comforts and cushy land and move to Israel, because life is not so easy in Israel. But God poured out his Spirit in 1967. It began, and there was a revival. And that revival went on, I don't know how long, but maybe 10 years or more. So there were a lot of people, like my husband and I, who didn't even know what we were looking for. We're just looking for the Spirit of God. And didn't experience, even though I love tradition and I love everything about being Jewish, didn't experience the Spirit of God. And that was what was drawing me. That was what made me jealous. So there were people that went off to find communes, or people that went off to do whatever. A lot of people got stuck in the New Age. When I share my testimony, I usually say I was looking for God in a lot of the wrong places. Wrong places meaning yoga, meditation, astrology, all kinds of things, Eastern religion, because my family had told me that it was even a sin to go into a church. So what I want to tell you, maybe you don't know, or maybe you don't know, that not only is there trauma in the DNA of Jewish people, but for lots of years, probably hundreds of years, Jewish people have been forced to convert. You know, whether it was the Inquisition, or whether it was the Crusade, or whether it was the Holocaust. And so I want to inspire you, encourage you to just love people where they're at. I think that was the message today as well. That there was a revival that happened in the 70s, and a lot of people that were, blessed to be a part of the Jesus movement came to the Lord at that time. But what we need to pray for is a modern day revival. And all over the world. And may it begin here and spread, or maybe it'll begin in Jerusalem and spread. But that's what I want to encourage you to know. That Jewish people need love just like any other people, and I'm encouraged by this group of people that are here in this room that took time out of this convention to show love and support for the people of Israel, because life is very hard for Jewish people, especially living in Israel. And I often teach children about Israel. If I had a map for you, I'm sure you can imagine it in your mind. If you can imagine living in California and people in Mexico being your enemy, people in Oregon being your enemy, people in Nevada and Utah and Colorado, and all these people out around you are your enemies, and there's no place to go except out to the ocean. That's pretty much how life is for people in Israel, the Jewish people, because they're surrounded by enemies, but greater is the Lord. He is the God of Israel. And so I think that through history, there have been Wycliffe translators. And they have started translating the Bible in many languages. There's hundreds of languages around the world. But most of them have started translating, starting with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and going on from there. So as Hyland was saying that we went to the Christian gathering of indigenous people, there now are Israelis going to these indigenous people, translating the whole Bible, starting with Genesis, in Hebrew it's Bereshit, and giving a Jewish understanding, because the Bible didn't just start in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It started a long time ago. So I wanted also to say that God is a God of love, and He's a God of covenant-keeping God. And a lot of times people think, well, God of the Old Testament was into instruction and condemnation and the law, and the God of the New Testament is about love and grace. So I'll just say one last thing. I think that the most accurate translation, and I don't know what it is in the new translation of the Bible, but the Torah is God's instruction. And a lot of translations say the Torah is the law, and that the law is bad, but if we didn't have laws, we'd live in anarchy. So it's really more, I would say, I would encourage you to know that God's instructions are good, and they are sweet, or sweeter than honey. And so maybe this will spread, this is kind of a new movement within Foursquare to have some kind of a Messianic flavor or Messianic Jewish understanding of the gospel, but may it go into instructing people, not only about the Torah, not only about the Bible, but how to really love the people that are Jewish people, because of where I came from and the kind of upbringing that I have. I want you to know that Jewish people don't discern between what's Pentecostal, Charismatic, Catholic, Mormon, Church of Christ, science, whatever. It's all lumped into one thing. So in my upbringing, my family really thought that the Nazis were Christian. And so actually my father had said to me when I came to the Lord, I don't know what kind of sin I've committed in my life for my daughter to become a Christian. Because to them it was a bad thing. So I want to encourage you all to make the word Christian become a loving, accepting, generosity, all of these positive things, new definition for the word, what it means to be a believer and a follower of the Lord. So I wasn't planning to say any of that, but God bless you all, and thank you for an amazing worship. There's such talented musicians here.
It's always a compliment when we say something in Hebrew and they answer back in Hebrew. My wife speaks Hebrew like an American. She understands most of it, but accent's different. So we're almost done with our first half here. I'm not sure if we should just save Bob, the Joseph Project, for the second half. Because we're sort of getting close to the wrapping up with some more music. Is that okay with you? Okay. So can we turn it back over to Lev Shalom? And so we've changed up a number of things here, so we're sort of flowing with the flow. I want to say one thing after getting back in position is we have a number of maybe you've heard, a lot of young people today don't want to be in services anymore. Have you heard that before? A lot of our young people, their 20s, early 30s, teenagers, they're sort of tired of services. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of tired of services too. I don't just want another service. I want to have an encounter with God. And as I was thinking about this recently, just this last Shabbat actually, I realized that when our people came out of Egypt, We had been slaves for 400 years. That the sign of the covenant that God gave to Moses for our people was Shabbat, the Sabbath day. Why is that? Because slaves don't rest. And so God says, I'm setting you apart, and I don't want you ever to forget Egypt. Egypt, by the way, is either Egypt or Egyptian is mentioned over 700 times in the Bible. Egypt, coming out of Egypt was such an important event. And when they came out of Egypt, what was the price that was paid for freedom? It was the death of the firstborn. Exodus chapter 12, the very next chapter, Exodus 13, God says, now, your firstborn belongs to me. You have to redeem the firstborn in order to keep that firstborn. And why was that? Because God was saying that such a great price was paid for your freedom. I don't want you to ever forget the cost for freedom. So I realized that God, in the wilderness, God gave our people a way to approach Him. And it was the tabernacle. It was the Ohel Moed, the sukkah in the desert. And it was a temporary dwelling, but it was very elaborate. And all the tribes, the 12 tribes gathered around the tabernacle, and they all had to camp in a very certain, very specific place. And the sacrifice and the system of priest and sacrifice was very, very specific and very detailed. A lot of order, because God's got order. And yet, when the cloud lifted off the tabernacle and began to move, it was like, okay, everybody, break camp, pack up, we're going. And they'd have to follow the cloud. Sometimes it was for maybe a day or two to just drop again and they would reset up camp. Other times it was months, they were traveling for months. And God was saying, there is order, there is direction, but you've got to be able to move with me, move freely with me. So services are okay, but if they're just service for service's sake and always predictable, then that's when I think we plan out the Spirit of God. And we need to be flexible to move with Him. So all that to say is we've just shifted a lot of things today, but that's okay. We're just sort of moving with what God's doing. Love Shalom.
Thank you for letting me use your mic.
Becca, we are going to start with It Is Good and Roni. Okay. Would you like to invite anyone to come join the circle? Is that it's a hard dance. Okay. So if the dancers would come forward. This form of music that we're about to do is a 2-song medley, and it's called klezmer, and it originated in the Eastern Bloc countries of Europe, and typically called the form of Jews called Ashkenazi, and my family is Ashkenazi, and the first one we're going to do is called It Is Good. It is good to praise the Lord and make music to your name, O God Most High, to proclaim your love and faithfulness all the day and through the nights. It is good to praise the Lord and make music to your name, O God Most High, to proclaim your love and faithfulness. Wow. Okay, so that's Ashkenazi. Would you like a little more Israeli flavored kind of a song? Because we cover the spectrum. So this is called Or Chadash. It's coming out on our next CD, Pray It Into Existence, but it's basically Or Chadash is a new light, and we are praying that the Lord Yeshua would come soon, because He is that new light, and may we all be worthy of Him soon.
Well, I'd like to introduce some friends of mine. Ted Vale. I want to tell a quick story here. Come here, Ted and Tammy. Don's talking to Rita. Tammy Donahoe. A couple years ago, Jeff Montanari and I met at a Messianic Rabbis Conference. And he said, hey, you're Jewish, I'm Jewish. You're Foursquare, I'm Foursquare. We started talking, and from that came this, what we call the Foursquare Rabbis Caucus. So about 2 years ago, approximately. And we had breakfast with Jack Hayford, and he loved what we were doing, and he wrote us a letter of endorsement, and that's been published now. And then I sent a book to Ted Vail, Don Finto's book, Your People Shall Be My People, which is really about God's heart for Israel and the church, because most Christians don't understand the place of Israel and the church and how the two work together. This book is like a classic. And then I had dinner with Ted up on Sunset and in LA, and which was my old stomping grounds when I was a hippie back in the 60s. And you know how you send someone a book and you wonder if they ever read it? So I said, hey Ted, remember that book I sent you? And he said, yeah, I read it. And I get you guys. Can we turn that down just a little bit? Or am I standing in the wrong place? I'm going to have to be on stage. I don't really want to get up on the stage right now.
The guy who's in charge just went to...
Okay. Talk a little softer, maybe. He said, I read it, and I get you. I know what you do. So he said,
I hear you. You can hear me fine. It's a small room. We can need this thing, right?
he said, I read it and I get you guys. So from that, we started talking about, well, what will this look like? What will the Foursquare Rabbis Caucus look like? And we had a booth last year in Dallas at convention, and now we have a booth here this time. So please come and visit our booth if you haven't seen it. Since then, this new Bible has come out that Daniel Greenberg has helped produce, and so we have a Messianic Bible for the first time. Really, it's really a phenomenal translation. You know what? I'm going to put this down. Is that okay?
Can you all hear me still?
Yeah.
Yes. And so Ted has been a great help to us. Ted and Jim Scott, and we've. I just wanted Ted to say a few things and greet everybody, and let you know kind of what Foursquare is doing, and why Foursquare even wants us to do this thing. I mean, it's really been wonderful to be embraced by Foursquare. And so our message is basically what we're doing. We're networking the Messianic world within Foursquare, and we're helping the church understand its Jewish roots, which is important. It's not a salvation issue, but it helps us with a more vibrant walk with God, and also to help Christians understand God's heart for Israel. Because I personally believe if we miss the Israel peace and revival, we're going to miss a big part of what God is doing in these last days.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Maybe I'll start. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Sure. Thanks. Thank you. Well, I want to share for just a moment, and then Tammy Dunham, who's the Vice President of Foursquare, General Supervisor of the U.S. Church, and I know she was looking forward to coming here and meeting you personally, and we didn't want to interrupt things, but we wanted to make sure that we could give a greeting. I would like to say thank you to Hyland and to Jeff, really for your energy that went into just being diligent to see something happen, and never rude or anything, but just so passionate that made it very easy to say we want to partner together. What's the heart of Foursquare? Well, we are interdenominational, and that's when we're at our best, is when we work together with others. But also, we definitely value. We value Messianic movement. I know that many of our leaders, and actually some key leaders in the Messianic movement, have been different relationship levels with Foursquare over the years. So for us, I would just say that we're honored that you're here. We are really honored that you're here, and we need you. Everybody needs you, and we're hoping that we have something to offer you as well, but we need each other. But we value this, we value you. And this is not only in the States, but also globally. I know that last skirmish, one of the last skirmishes that took place in Israel with the West Bank and such, and Foursquare has a disaster relief branch, and we found ourselves really through our local contacts there providing disaster relief to everyone, because that's really the heart of God, and we're going to reach out and touch everyone. But in that, it happened that they were saying, we've had to relocate some Holocaust survivors that were right in the middle of the fray. Wow. And so there was on that side, and just families in dire need and that were getting neglected in some way or another. So it was great to be able to kind of link what we're experiencing here and linking it to other places as well. So if I could just say that we're believing our best days are ahead, and we want to encourage you that you are a part of our prophetic future together. That God's put a word in your heart, you have a ministry, and when we say we need you, we're not saying we need you, so come be like the rest of us. We're saying we need you, so be like you. As Yeshua works through you, then that's what will be radiant for the rest of us to work together. So thank you again, and God bless you. And I want to say that while people thank me for what we've been able to do in just creating room and structure and some room for the Seder and different things, I just want you to know that comes because when I go to Tammy's office, and she's as excited about all of this as anybody could be, in sponsoring this and making sure that whatever you need is happening. And so I'm very appreciative for Tammy Donahue, and so Tammy.
This really isn't just to be nice to each other. I couldn't do what I do without Ted, and you just need to know that, because Jeff had written to me, and I think Hyla had it. There's just so many different things happening, and if I didn't have him, we would not serve you well. And so I'm very grateful for him. And what I've come to understand this past 6 years of this role that I've been carrying is that the Lord's church is extremely varied. We are very diverse. The world is very diverse. And that is the beautiful thing, because I think it represents the image of God and all of the facets of who He is. And so I'm very grateful that this has come together. And thank you for your patience in getting there. I've also learned that process and time are just God's way of doing things. He never works as quickly as I'd like it to, but He does things in His time. And so thank you, and we're glad for all of you that are here today. And we just look forward to all of us linking arms together, fulfilling what God has appointed us to do in these days. Amen. So God bless you.
Amen. Thank you very much. We were just at the Native American, I don't know if you saw it, the Native American gathering, and in Foursquare we have a really strong, growing, vibrant American Indian group. Yeah. And instead of neckties there, they hand out beads. And so I like that culture. God bless you, and Helen, thank you again. Thank you. So, as planned, we're going to take a short break, maybe about 10 minutes. And then we're going to come back, and we're going to have some more Lev Shalom and some more sharing, and Bob Black's going to share about what's happening at the Joseph Project, and maybe we'll do some more teaching and more sharing. And wait a minute, Jonathan's here. Jonathan, wait a second. So Jonathan Feldstein is with Heart to Heart. I'm wearing the bracelet here, and Heart to Heart is, he can tell you more than I can, but when we go to Israel, all over Israel, we see the ambulances, the Magen David Adom. Magen David Adom would be the red shield of David, technically. It's sort of like the Israeli Red Cross, but they're not connected to the Red Cross. They're their own entity. And our congregation has been supporting Magen David Adom for many years. I met Jonathan last year at the convention in Dallas, and he's sort of I just see what Jeff calls you. Calls you the vampire. No, Jonathan is raising, so what Israel needs very desperately is blood. You can imagine, small country, a lot of terror attacks, a lot of issues in hospitals. Jonathan's raising funds in the States to help support this very important ministry organization in Israel. So,
thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege.
And correct me if I said anything wrong or weird or...
No, the only inaccuracy, which is relatively new and not well publicized, is Magen David Adom, Red Star or Red Shield of David, is in fact Israel's member to the International Red Cross. In America, people think of Red Cross and think of blood services. There are a number of Red Cross societies around the world that have other services. In Israel, Magen David Adom, the red, which is symbolized by the Red Star of David, is Israel's national ambulance, EMS, and blood service, and domestic and international rescue service. So we just came back from Nepal, both helping save people there and also bringing back Israelis, including something magnificent that I witnessed almost 2 weeks ago, a plane that came back from Nepal bringing a couple of babies that were born to serve mothers in Nepal to their Israeli parents, but we're talking about premature babies in incubators with ambulances lined up, ready. So it's literally the saving lives not only in Israel but the far reach.
So I didn't know the Magen David Adom was involved in the international relief.
In the International Red Cross. So for the first 5 decades of Israel's existence, the Red Cross rejected having Magen David Adom as a member, and that changed June of 2006 when both Magen David Adom entered as Israel's Red Cross Society and the Palestinian Red Crescent as the Palestinian Red Cross Society. But we've been saving lives all over Haiti, many places around the world. But as Highland said, the blood services of the state of Israel, there's one. There's one blood service. We process 97% of the blood of the country. This Thursday will be 2 weeks. I had an extraordinary blood donation with a group of students from Oral Roberts University, which was amazing. What an unbelievable blessing. 30 people donated blood. 90 Israelis' lives will be able to be saved from the 30 people who donated blood. But sadly, underscoring the reality in which we live, that same afternoon, there was a terrorist who ran over 4 people not far from my home in Gush Etzion, 3 of whom were boys in my son's high school. One of whom was the 10th grade 6-foot center of their basketball team who required 2 surgeries on his legs. And I don't know that blood was involved, and we don't track that. But the same day, Christian students from Tulsa were donating blood in Jerusalem. A Jewish Israeli settler was run over and required surgery. And the terrorist, by the way, was treated in the same hospital as the victims, and first treated by a young man who made Aliyah the same day we did on the same plane from the same town in New Jersey. So it's a funny wave, and it's a blessing, and we're grateful. It's funny that we only met a year ago. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like Sinai, I suppose.
It's the blood we share.
It's the blood, for sure. But there is a great need for the blood services, the ambulance services in Israel. There is one of each. And that brings with it its own risks, because we're a small country. What you've been doing even before we met in terms of supporting Magen David Adom is wonderful, and you know that. And I get to come here to Foursquare and other incredible places around the country to share with people what we do as Heart to Heart, as a ministry reaching out to support Magen David Adom, the ambulance and blood services. And certainly I'm around. I'm the token Orthodox Jew that they let in the place, and I welcome connecting with you individually and fellowshipping locally and virtually. Thank you.
So you don't have a booth this year.
No booth.
So do you have brochures?
I have some brochures with. I have business cards.
Okay, so if you want more information, take a brochure, take a card. It's one of those. It's a way to connect with the land of Israel.
Amen.
That is not only critical for Israel's survival, but it's a mitzvah. It's a way for us to connect. It's a blessing to us as well. So it's a two-way blessing. Okay?
Amen.
Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll come back in about 10 minutes.
Stretch tracks. Walk really fast and stop it down there. You guys will keep going. Nobody about
You can bring your food in, I'm sure. But we are going to do the songs that we've already done, but Sir Tommy has to leave, so we're just going to go ahead and start, and you can come on in when you feel it. Feel led by the Spirit. Grab salad.
That's kind of what I figured. That's why I thought it was good just to make the left shoulder a little
Really? Mine too. Doesn't Sarah Tomei do a beautiful job on the solo? It's so easy to get lost in. We're going to do one more song with featuring Sarah Tomei on the violin. And this is called Hatov Shilcha. Do you want anyone to just try and jump in there and join you? Anyone who wants to join in the dance circle, please feel free. This is a very easy, very simple dance. It's very worshipful. It's a waltz. And waltzes are typically very simple. Okay, here we go. Oh, why don't we bump it up a couple of notches? Yes. So we don't fall asleep. There must have been turkey in the salad.
Yes, there was.
I'm feeling tryptophan. Cindy, who's that? I love them. Are you going to dance with them? Cool. This is called Proclamation. Little guitar switch here. Why don't you all come in and have a seat? Yeah. Or stand. You might want to stand. As our writing style goes, Mark usually writes some chording and arranges things, and he doesn't have a melody or words, and I come up with the melody or words. And I knew the concept of this next song. It was in my heart, and it was about facing down fear. And I pictured in my mind Daniel in the lion's den, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire. And I thought to myself, I wonder how that must have felt, knowing that they were going to be facing certain death. And in our lives, most of us have not faced certain death. Maybe we've come close. But not for a certainty. You still have a long time on this earth, girlfriend. What would we do? How would we react? I know that I have a son, and he has faced nearly certain death. And as a mother, I was kvetching for him. But really, how did Daniel feel when he was standing in the lion's den and he was looking at those lions and they were hungry? I'd like to think that he thought to himself, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. The Lord, our God, the Lord is one. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed be He whose glorious kingdom is forever and ever. That's the watchword for the Jewish community. Every Jew knows that bedtime prayer. And we say it when we rise up and when we lie down. So that's what proclamation is about. It's a proclamation to the Lord. Lord, you are still God. You are still one. Your glorious kingdom reigns forever, come what may. Right? This is life. We have trials. How we get through them shows who you are. Make this a watchword for yourselves. Today I'm not preaching to the choir. I know you haven't heard this just once or twice. You've heard it a million times, but today is your day. Make this a prayer of your heart that you are going to stand and you're going to say, come what may, God, I will praise you. I praise you in the good times, I praise you in the bad times. I just praise you. If that's all I'm created for, if that's all I have to do, that's what I'm going to do. Amen.
Dark
listen to one more? Okay.
All right, can we have everybody come in? I know we're still kind of wrapping up eating, but we want to let Pastor Bob Black share, and then we'll let Pastor Corey continue some more. Hey, she's a pastor, worship pastor, what do you want? And Bob, you want to share on the Joseph experience?
Right now?
Yeah, let's do it. We want to hear from Pastor Bob and videotape it so we get it down pat so we remember what he's doing and helping the Joseph Project. He's running late. He's on Georgetown. Don't go too far. Bob only has 2 minutes.
Okay, I have
No,
prizes
hold on.
in here for everybody. Give me 1 minute. Okay, Deborah, your job is to tell me to pick this up at the end when I'm done. So when you think I'm done,
When you're done.
not too far. These are the super prizes. Thank you. Okay, I have a small note to tell you what I was going to say, and then what I'm really going to say, because as Paula Harvey would say, the rest of the story, and it happened only in the last 2 days, which is amazing. Yes. What?
Nobody said it.
You didn't hear that?
No.
I thought his voice was deeper than that. Okay, very quickly. The older you get, the more stories you have because more things happen and other things get longer. But to make a long story short, I thought I knew, a long time ago, I thought I knew where I was going in my life. I had things sort of planned. You have a certain educational course, certain degrees, and you do certain things on that route where you're going. And about here, God said clearly, make a 90-degree right turn. And I did, never to go back to that intersection of where I thought I would be. And that had to do with coming into the Messianic movement. I'm not Jewish. I ended up leading a Messianic congregation for over 20-some years. And how in the world did that ever happen? I had no clue that that's where I would be. Well, that's a long story we're not going to get into today. However, something happened that dramatically changed my life before I made that turn. And I know, as Corey said, I'm preaching to the choir, but that's the way it goes. We went on a trip to Israel. And I was told that God will speak to you there in a unique way, and He did. And He said, look at the land. When you walk the land, this is the land I gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants forever. Not to you, Bob, you're not Jewish, but to them. You're to teach that. You're to proclaim that truth. And there's a jillion verses that say that. And I was all excited by that. And I came back and I immediately began going to our church and other churches and anywhere that you could teach, and I was teaching it. Did you know that this land belongs to the Jewish people? Did you know that? So, promised land. So, second of all, my second trip, I only thought I'd go once. I went a few more times, 30 sometimes. God spoke again, and He said, this time look at the people. He said, I want you to bless the people, the Jewish people. I gave them this land. You are to teach and proclaim that Christians are to bless Jews any way they can, but they are to do it, and that's your message. So it's promised land, chosen people. All right? So finish my lecture. So, with that in mind, retirement comes. I never like to use that word, but the Lord spoke at a point in time and said, okay, now's the time for you to leave this congregation. And I said, and do what? And there was no voice anymore. But the one to leave was pretty loud and clear, so we left. And so recently, I think I know why. So I get a phone call from Joel Chernoff. You all know Joel Chernoff, right? Just before the regional conference, he said, this is really important, I've got to talk to you. So, okay. And when you're sort of a retired and don't want to be, this is music to your ears. The words were, I have a job for you. Yeah. Oh, okay, we'll talk. Now, you all know about the Joseph Project, right? The Joseph Project is the largest single humanitarian aid endeavor in the land of Israel, and it's run by Messianic Jews. That in itself is phenomenal. It took 15 years pardon me, to gain credibility with all the opposition. That has totally turned around, which is American. We were praying for this for years. But I want to give you a little bit of statistics. This is only going to take a couple of minutes, but I want to read it because I want to get it right. In the last few years, okay, I haven't told you my job yet, right? The Joseph Project has given away $100 million worth of aid to 250,000 people in the land of Israel. You think that's well? You wait. 2014, okay, 44 containers came in. They came to a warehouse that we had and were distributed worth $6 million. Okay, now we have 43 distribution centers all over the land of Israel, and 100 more past that they're connected to that are government approved. Everything is carefully and calculated to kick up track of because of the black market. They know exactly who gets what. In 2015, that's this year, 60 containers have come in. You might want to ask, where do those containers come from? Where do they come from? All right. Their fiscal year starts in July, okay? So 60 have come in. The goal for next year is 125 containers. That's where we are with the Joseph Project, all right? So they give what comes in. As fast as the containers come in, the goods are given out to people in need. 25% of the population of Israel is below the poverty line. Why? Because all the Russians coming in from Ukraine and so on with nothing and no money and no jobs. And so the main target group that's getting the stuff right now are the new immigrants, Holocaust survivors, widows, orphans, and the elderly. And then anyone who has a need. Did I say anyone? What about the enemies of Israel? Yes. Okay, we bless anyone. If you have need, you are blessed. We give to you free, no charge, it's always free. So that's amazing. Now, the prayer request came in for next year, 125 containers. I'm leaving all this up to my new job. The update is this, that by the end of next month, 50 containers will be arriving. Keep your math going here, 50. By the end of August, another 75. So in the first 2 months of the fiscal year, the goal will already be met. That's how fast this is growing. God is blessing. God is blessing. And who's doing this? Christian individuals, Christian groups, churches, denominations. We're getting phone calls in the last 2 weeks from denominational leadership. We're talking big groups of people saying, we'd like to meet with you at the Messiah Conference because we think our denomination would like to make the Joseph Project a part of their outreach on how we bless Israel. This is huge. You're talking bringing in millions of people. And the awareness level is rising. That's one of the things I want to do here. We've got there is raising the awareness of what this is and what it's doing. It gives away. We don't charge money for anything. Whatever the need is, if you have a need, you get it. Now, here's where my new job comes in. All right. Joel wanted to talk to me. He says, we're expanding the Joseph Project and we're putting in a new part called the Joseph Experience. Now, I've had some experience leading tours to Israel, okay? That's where they thought Susan and I might be good. We went the tours to make the Joseph Project an official stop on their tour. And we're going to give them an experience of a lifetime. And so my job is to talk to tour leaders. These tours all have really tight schedules. But the deal is this. About halfway through the trip, on all of our trips, and some of you have been there, I start hearing the people saying things like, I want to do something. Is there something I can do to bless these people, to bless this land? And we go, there's programs, you got to come back and so on. Well, now we offer something they can do. The official stop is right where the restroom stop is needed. That's important, we have clean restrooms. That is very important. At the new warehouse, the size of it is 50,000 cubic feet. It is more than impressive. I see the videos, but when you see it in person, it's like, holy cow, this is first class. And it is first class. So when the tour group comes, here's the deal. And here's what I am telling people. Anybody you know that might be interested, I have prizes, handouts, in my bag for you to give to them. You get off the bus, you come into the lobby, which is first class. It's beautiful. It's like a hotel. You get coffee. You're welcomed by smiling, happy people. And you get tea, you get water, restroom stop. Then you go into a nice theater. Believe it or not, a nice theater. You see a only 7 minutes, video of an updating on what is going on with the Joseph Project. Who's getting the stuff? Where is it going? There's a phenomenal amount of accountability. You know, we know what comes in, where it goes, who gets it, and so on. Then they go and see the warehouse. Oh, this is amazing. Isn't this wonderful? This is great. The best is yet to come. There's these long tables set up with stuff. And the warehouse workers who are from Russia, right, they have arms the size of my legs, all right? You want Misha on your team, trust me on this. It's set up to where your tour group then packs the emergency bomb shelter kits for the next war, because in the last war they ran out. Wow. And there aren't any. And the next war is coming very soon. And so hands-on, people want a hands-on experience of blessing. You are personally packing what they're going to need for the oncoming attacks. Then you get to pray over that God will protect whoever gets this from that harm. That's meant for them. Some of them are children's boxes, okay, and some specialize and so on. But you get the experience of doing something. It's not theory. This is going to happen, and they're going to be used, and you have a chance to do that. So you are hands-on blessing the people in need at that point in time. Then we offer a group picture. Get your picture taken as a group. You get a certificate. It's a Heart for Israel certificate that you bless Israel. And a tree is planted in the Messianic forest in Kiryat Shmona on behalf of your group, a group tree. So, and you get all that documentation sent to you when you get home. And, almost the best part, you get a free lunch. So let me, you who have led groups, a clean restroom stop and a free lunch, what's that worth? That's worth a lot right there. But you get to see what's happening. And one of the reasons they're doing this is that once leaders see this, they'll pass the word to other leaders who want to make this a stop. And it raises the level of people praying for what we're doing. And we want people to know how God is blessing this. And you can partner with us in prayer. We show you how to do that. And that's my new job. So pray for me, okay? I'm going to sit down behind him and arm wrestle him down and make him give me a date. When he's going to be there. So pray, because as a tour leader, our schedules are always tight. But our first one that we're working with, the itinerary looked impossible. I mean, really impossible. But a little bit of tweaking and working, and with the tour company, which is here, and with the leader, we got it to work. We go, and when the people hear about it, they want to do it. So this is a way when a tour is there to have a hands-on lesson and know that what you do will be greatly appreciated. When the sirens go off, they don't have much time to get to the shelter. It best not be empty. So what they need there. So any questions? Okay, I have handouts. I'm not going to hand them out. Afterwards, you have to go up and ask me for them and how to stay in touch. Yes? Anyway, but if you're registered, you can come to our booth and get all the stuff, but if you're not, I'll give it to you here, but I'm not going to pass it out now. Come up to me and I'll show you how to stay in our prayer letter as well. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, we used to volunteer at one of the places, and they got so many volunteers, but they couldn't use more volunteers. So do they have a plan for when, what are they going to do when they get all these volunteers, And they have to have something to do.
Well, right now, we're looking at one bus at a time. And if a whole bunch wants to come, we'll figure it out. But the place is first class. The people that work there are first class, godly people. It's a blessing just to be there. Promise Keepers came with about 200. They said it was the best experience of the tour. I mean, they're singing, as they're packing the boxes and you pray over them. And this is something that's really useful. It's not like a ferry. There will be missiles coming. Yes?
Are you hiring?
Sure.
Get in line. Get in line.
So what I want you to do is to have you pray for the Joseph Project, the Joseph Experience, and pray for me. I don't want 8,000 people to talk to. I want the right ones to talk to. The ones who want to go there and bless the land and the people of Israel. So that I have those encounters here. We've had some already. So pray for that and pass the word. The best way to do it is to have them just call me. And all of our numbers are on the stuff in the bag of goodies that you'll get when we're all finished. Okay, bless you, and I thank you. That's my new job. It's for the prayer. When I was sort of retired, didn't like the word, that people would say, well, what do you want to do next? Well, I want to teach. I'm a teacher. I want to teach, right? What do you want to do next? So I make this little list. Well, I want to do something that blesses Israel and that blesses Jews. And then the phone rings. It's Joel. Okay, this blesses Israel. This blesses Jews. Okay, I'll do that. That's cool.
And when Rita and I were in Israel, we were there for a month, April 22nd to May 21st, last Thursday. We had dinner with Jim Schutz. I can't remember if it's Schutz or Schutz. I'll have to find some way to remember that. It's not shut the door, keep out the devil. Shoots and ladders. Okay, that sounds good. And Jim was telling us, Jim and Leslie were telling us about the new project. That's great. I wanted Shmuel, also known as Sam or Sammy, but that's his Foursquare name, to tell us a little bit about his connection to Foursquare. And he may be the oldest Messianic in Foursquare. Not the oldest in age, but just been around Foursquare the Jewish guy that's been around Foursquare the longest. That's what I meant to say. And a little bit about what's happening at Lev Hashem in Las Vegas. So, really. And before he shares, Shmuley is the reason we are in Seattle, because on January 16th, 1996, you called me and you asked me if I would consider moving to Seattle to become the rabbi of a Messianic Foursquare congregation on January 16th, 1996. And we began to pray, and the rest is history. So we're there pretty much because of Shmuel.
Do you remember what you told me when I said, would you consider and pray about a congregation in Emmaus at the time?
Do you remember what I said?
Yes, I did. I said, I don't know, Shmuel, we're pretty comfortable here in Phoenix.
That's what I said?
Yeah, and I thought, Holly, you should have never said that. 2 weeks later, he calls me back. Do you remember this?
No.
And he says, I should have never said that we are comfortable in Phoenix, Arizona. How long have you been there now?
It'll be 19 years on July 23rd.
Now, are you...
but I'm not into dates or anything.
Are you comfortable?
Did you keep on there?
Yes. See,
it's there.
That's what you call double cover. I was born and raised in El Paso, grew up in Isleta, Texas. Is there anyone here who has never heard of Isleta, Texas? It's the oldest town in the state of Texas, part of El Paso, considered the second oldest town in the United States of America, next to St. Augustine, Florida. I grew up in a Jewish home. My mother accepted Yeshua when I was about 6 or 7 years old. My daddy got really upset. If this Jesus stuff is going to make you happy, okay, that's that's your business, but not for my son. Don't you dare be taking him to church. My mother was very submissive, but not very obedient. And she would sneak us off to church. It was a Foursquare church. And finally, my daddy died when I was 10 years old, and at age 15, I accepted Jesus. There wasn't a Messianic Jewish movement at the time. And I accepted Jesus at age 15, and instantly I knew that God was calling me into spiritual leadership. I started preaching 3 weeks later. And then I went to the Foursquare Bible College. Paul McTeacher was the pastor there at the El Paso Foursquare Church. He was a long, tall, lanky Texan from Lubbock, and really into sports, and that was part of what attracted me. Went to the Foursquare Bible College and graduated in '66, got a bachelor's degree in '68, and I've been in full-time public ministry ever since, and have never regretted, God's call and being obedient to that call. I think I was the only Jewish student at Life Bible College. Me and my sister, I think, were the only Jewish kids in high school, Isleta High School. And I can remember in around 1972-73, I started hearing about the Messianic Jewish movement. My sister had gone to Israel to make Aliyah, and she called me from Israel telling me, I'm meeting Israelis who are believers in Yeshua. And I remember just the impact of that. Really? Are you serious? Yes. This Messianic Jewish movement was really taking off. For the most part, my background insofar as Yeshua was from a Christian basis, but from that moment on, I started going back to synagogue, studying, taking classes, and from around 1972, I got involved in Messianic Judaism. I spent 3 years in Central South America doing international mobile outreach, preaching throughout Central and South America. I saw thousands of people accept Jesus into their lives. And then I started also visiting synagogues in Guatemala, in Chile, in Brazil, and in Colombia. And there was Ashkenazi and Sephardic in those synagogues in Central South America. Came back to El Paso and started a Messianic Jewish congregation in my hometown, and led it for 12 years. Spent around 10 years in Southern California, and then Rabbi Resnick, who is the executive director of the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations, called me and said there's a congregation that is open in Las Vegas and they're looking for a permanent leader. I had not accepted any kind of a permanent position for more than 16 years, and I told him, well, maybe I could go there and help them out just on a temporary basis. By the way, what time frame do you want me to be sensitive to?
About 30 seconds.
30 seconds. You're getting back at me. And so I prayed about it, and as soon as I flew in to Las Vegas, I just knew that's where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to make that permanent commitment. And I checked with 3 or 4 other Messianic rabbis, and with about 3 or 4 Foursquare pastors, and they all said, yeah, do it. Sounds right. So I've been there more than 10 and a half years. They had Lev Hashem, Messianic Jewish Synagogue. Before I went there, I had 5 different spiritual leaders, and they fired, all of them. So in going, they invited me to be the permanent leader. I don't think that I was naive as to some of the background, and I knew if I can make it 2 or 3 years, maybe things will stabilize. And been there more than 10 and a half years now, and it's been a good 10 and a half years. God has been good. Those of you that, if this is your first time to be in something Messianic Jewish, I would just like to say to you, from now on, this is where the action really is going to be. Israel is the focus like never before. And along with the revival and the prophetic that Rita so articulated, there will be the challenge, the persecution, the demonic attack with it. On Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles in September, there will be another blood moon and also a solar eclipse. And it looks like, from not only Christian scholars, but Messianic Jewish scholars who have a prophetic dimension, there will either be a tremendous outpouring and along with it, a time of tremendous judgment. In the book of Matthew, it speaks that all the nations will come against Israel, including the United States. The believing community of the United States, I believe, will hold firm that evangelical, conservative, Bible-believing, moral value part of the body of believers, Jew and Gentile, will hold firm and strong with Israel. But I would really encourage those of you who are just touching the fringes of Messianic Judaism, hang in there, be involved, be committed, support, give to it. And I believe that we will be something of prophetic, tremendous prophetic significance. I've always kept my Foursquare credentials. Lev Hashem is not a Foursquare Messianic Jewish synagogue, except in that spirit. They know of my background, but it's one of those situations where the leadership and the congregation has always felt it should not be affiliated organizationally with a Christian denomination. And like also Rita mentioned, in the Jewish mind, they will lump together Christianity, especially with the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church just recently, a few days ago, came out. They are supporting a Palestinian state to come alongside Israel, while at the same time they are advocating the destruction of Israel. How can you have an adjoining state, a recognized state, that is calling for your annihilation? And I know that there are Catholics in the Catholic Church that are truly born again. The Catholic Church also believes in replacement theology. They believe they will rule and reign from Jerusalem. Not Jews, not Israel, not even God, the Catholic Church. So let's be in prayer, about this. Foursquare is a missionary denomination. It's probably 50 times or 100 times as large around the world as what it is in the United States. But the word missionary in Israel is a hated term because the teaching is Christianity steals the soul of the Jew. And when you're Jewish and you believe in Yeshua, you don't lose that identity, that heritage, that covenant that God has with Israel and the Jewish people. It's the mark of Jacob, the mark of Yaakov. And so as we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and as we see prophecy being fulfilled, this is probably the most exciting time biblically and prophetically in all the world. Be part of it. Support it, love it, pray for it, give to it, and God will really bless. Hine lo yanum ve'en lo yishan, lo yanum ve'en lo yishan. Hine lo yanum ve'en lo yishan, shomer Yisrael, neither slumbers nor sleeps, slumbers nor sleeps, neither slumbers nor sleeps. He that keeps Yisrael, neither slumbers nor sleeps, slumbers nor sleeps. El que guarda Yisrael nunca duerme ni sueña, duerme ni sueña, nunca duerme ni sueña. El que guarda Yisrael nunca duerme ni sueña, duerme ni sueña. Abba, thank you that in this Foursquare conference there is a platform, an opportunity for Messianic Judaism to have a part and to have a place and to have the encouragement and the blessing of this wonderful, special denomination. And Abba, I thank you for someone like Jeffrey Montanari, who is pioneering. There's an apostolic dimension to what he is doing in bringing Messianic Jewish leaders, congregations, into a relationship with this awesome Christian denomination. Continued blessing, giving favor. And as Foursquare blesses Israel around the world, not just in the land, as Foursquare blesses Israel, so will God bless Foursquare in even a greater way than ever before. And I just thank you for Highland and for Rita and for all the years of wonderful special relationship and fellowship. I thank you for their lives and for their family and for their ministry in the Seattle area. And Abba, I just thank you for Corey and for Lev Shalom. What a blessing, what an anointing on this special, unique ministry. Amen. Bless everyone who is here, who is part of this gathering. In Yeshua's name, amen. Amen.
Shmuley, how long have you been with Foursquare? How many years?
Oh, probably right around 50.
50 years. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm 172 years old.
So I'm just going to share quickly here, just for a few minutes. I say that often and I go longer, but because it's 4:30, and what do you want? We want to close with worship. We want Lev Shlo to have some more time. We have until 5:15. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
Don't tell him that.
I want to welcome Howard Diamond. Howard's in the back row here. Howard and Renee Diamond were part of our church when we were probably about 100 people in Phoenix, Arizona. About 88 or something like that. 88, 89, somewhere there. My wife and I moved from Northern California to Phoenix. There was a church going with 19 people in it, kind of like a church plant, but they weren't doing anything, it wasn't growing. And my wife came with the five of us, my wife and our 3 kids. So in one night, the church grew about 30%, from 19 to 24. And 10 years later, we were over 800, and that's when we came up to Seattle. Anyway, it's another story. Howard and his wife were an important part of our early days, growing. They were leading worship, and they were discipling, and they were counseling. And now, is it Celebration Tabernacle still?
New Life, but we just changed the foundation.
New Life? Now you're called what?
Foundation.
Foundation?
Yeah.
Just Foundation?
That's it.
Wow, it's pretty foundational. And you're in Mesa, Arizona, right? Mesa, Arizona, and they're also Foursquare, and they're also Jewish. And Howard sings beautiful Yiddish songs. So, a couple quick things. There's a book we're giving away at our booth called What About Us? The End Time Calling of Gentiles in Israel's Revival. And this is written by Eitan Shishkoff. My wife and I were having dinner with Eitan and Connie Shishkoff last Tuesday night in Haifa. And he said, would you like to give away some of my books at the conference? I said, well, yeah, but how can we get them there? You know. So anyway, he made some calls, and they arrived. 2 cases, so we're giving away Eitan's book, 1 per family, hopefully, or if you want to take one for someone who think could benefit from it. Also, I have about 30 copies of this article. It's actually 2-part, called The Error of Replacement Theology. Some people have a hard time explaining what it actually means. This was produced by Bridges for Peace. So at the end, if you want one, I've got some copies over here, because Shmuley mentioned a little bit about replacement theology. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit now, and share a little bit of our testimony as we go. But a number of years ago, I was at a Messiah conference in Pennsylvania, and the keynote speaker that year was Coach McCartney from Promise Keepers. And about a week before, maybe less than a week before, I was reading Deuteronomy chapter 28, where the Lord says, the Lord will make you, speaking to Israel, the Lord will make you the head and not the tail. And I just sort of stopped in my tracks, and I thought the Lord was saying, I felt like I heard him say, that the Messianic movement is going to be the head of the church and not the tail. Now basically, we've been the tail for many, many years, and I know a lot of Foursquare pastors, they just don't get Israel. They don't understand God's heart for Israel. They don't understand the place of the Jew in the church. They don't understand the importance of Jewish roots in terms of our the fulfillment of our walk with God. And they don't seem to care that Jesus was Jewish either. So it's all just kind of funny. So this, I felt like the Lord said, you'll be the head and not the tail. So I'm at the conference. Coach McCartney is preaching on a Wednesday night. I'm sitting up in the balcony, and I'm sitting there, and he gets on his knees, and he said, you Jewish people, you Messianic Jews, the Lord told me you're to be the head and not the tail. And I just got like, when you felt like flush, and like flushed white, and I just started to weep. And I'm sitting there in my chair, just crying and crying. And I couldn't believe it, because when the Lord spoke it to me, I couldn't tell anybody. Because they think, well, you're on an ego trip. You're a Jew. You know, you want to be the head. You know, you got a big head. And so that was Coach McCartney and Promise Keepers, and the Lord was taking him and Raleigh, Washington on a whole another track, which was to bless Israel and the Jewish people, and they called it the Road to Jerusalem, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's another story. But another thing that happened in terms of replacement theology is a lot of Christians read the Bible. Can you hear me over this? Yeah. Well, just say this is like worship in the background. Okay? Sort of like angels are singing back there. It's like when babies cry in our services, I tell people, they're not crying, they're singing. You
We encourage families and encourage families to bring their kids, except when I'm preaching. For instance, in Ezekiel's vision in chapter 37 of the dry bones, and God breathed, Ezekiel has this vision, and there's these dry bones, and then they come to life, and then God breathes on them. He said God breathed into the bones, and sinew and flesh came on the bones. They came back to life, and Ezekiel said something like, "God, what in the world is that?" And God gives him the interpretation of the vision, and he said, "That's Judah and Israel. I'm breathing life into them. I'm going to bring them back to their own land." And what has the church done? They say, well, that's the church. God breathes life. Now, the principles of God hold true for everybody, Jews and Gentiles alike. But let's just say that was not for the church. That was God bringing the Jewish people back to their own land. Very specific prophecy. And so when God says to Abram, "I'll bless those who bless you, and he who curses you, I will curse, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed," I just take that literally. When Yeshua said, "You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and even the remotest parts of the earth," I don't think he meant Jerusalem was your neighborhood anywhere you live. Which is what we hear for years and years and years. Jerusalem's your neighborhood. Judea, Samaria are your local city or your local state, and the remotest parts of the earth is the rest of the world. I think Yeshua meant Jerusalem when he said Jerusalem, because every other reference to Jerusalem in the Bible is Jerusalem. So why would that one verse all of a sudden mean your neighborhood? So that's something you can take those principles, but you have to be very careful. I once heard, ever hear of David Davis? He's got a congregation in Haifa, and he was trained under David Wilkerson in Times Square Church in New York, and I heard him preaching once up in the Seattle area. He was at a very large, charismatic church, and on the back of their wall was projected a verse from Isaiah about bringing your people from the north, the south, east, and west. They're all going to come back to the land. And at one point, he turned around and said, "You know what? That's a great verse." It was their missions verse. Okay, to go to all the world and bring people from all four corners. He said, "That is a great verse, but when you're done with it, would you please give it back to us?" Basically that was a verse that God had given specifically to bring the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. So I just want to say a few things about that. Secondly, I was talking to someone earlier today about the fact that most Jewish people think Christians hate them. Most Jewish people have a very hard time with even the word Christian, or Christianity, or church, or cross. And when I orient people to our congregation, I said there's these 5 C words that we don't use very often because the Jewish people don't like them. Church, Christianity, Christ, cross, and convert. And so we use Messiah, and we use congregation or Kehillah, and we use tree, although I do use cross probably more than I used to, because there's been a lot of anti-Semitism in the church. I'm going to read just a couple quick quotes. One is from John Chrysostom, he was a 4th century archbishop of Constantinople. And John Chrysostom was known as the golden-mouthed preacher. And when I was being trained as a disciple of the Lord, John Chrysostom, everybody wanted to be like John Chrysostom because he was this wonderful preacher. Here's what he said, quote, "The synagogue, the Jewish synagogue, is worse than a brothel. It's the den of scoundrels and the repair of wild beasts. It is a criminal assembly of Jews, a place of meeting for the assassins of Christ, a den of thieves, a house of ill fame, a dwelling of iniquity, the refuge of devils, a gulf and abyss of perdition. I would say the same things about their souls. And as for me, I hate the synagogue. I hate the Jews for the same reason." This is an early church father, 4th century. Erasmus, 16th century Catholic priest and theologian. Who is there among us who does not hate this race of men? If it is Christian to hate the Jews, here we all are, Christians in profusion. And we wonder why it's so hard to reach the Jewish people with the message, the good news of their Messiah, Jesus, their Messiah. Martin Luther, the father of the Protestant Reformation, many of you have probably heard these quotes before. He said this, "Verily, a hopeless, wicked, venomous, and devilish thing is the existence of these Jews, who for 1400 years have been and still are our pest, our torment, and our misfortune. They are just devils and nothing more. Know, Christian, that next to the devil, thou hast no enemy more cruel, more venomous, and violent than a true Jew." Martin Luther. And let's see. Yeah, I think that's enough quotes. There's lots of books of quotes about the anti-Semitism in the church. But amazingly, rather than acknowledge their failings, Christians have pointed to the Jewish rejection of Jesus as a sign of their hardness of heart. But have we forgotten that the church was supposed to make Jewish people jealous?
Yeah.
It's just the opposite has happened. What do I mean by that? That's what Paul said in Romans 11. He said, "Did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel jealous, to make Israel envious." And that was my story. That's my wife's story. We were on our way to India to find a guru in 1970. And we ended up at a Christian community in Switzerland called L'Abri with Francis and Edith Schaefer. And they were Gentile Christians who made us jealous because they knew more about the Jewish people than we did. They knew more about Israel than we did. In fact, Edith Schaefer is writing her first book, Christianity is Jewish, where she paints a Jewish thread from Genesis to Revelation. It's very beautiful. And they made us jealous. You know, Paul compares Israel to an olive tree in Romans 11, where the Jews are the natural branches and that have been broken off because of unbelief, but will be grafted back in again when they accept Yeshua as their Messiah. The Gentiles are the wild branches, also grafted into the rich fruit of the olive tree. Do you know you Gentiles are a wild kind of people? Do you know that? Kind of wild and crazy, but we accept you anyway. We accept you.
Thank you.
Paul says in Romans 11:17, if some of the branches have been broken off, that would be the Jewish branches broken off, and you Gentiles, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive tree, do not boast against those branches. Gentiles, don't boast against the branches. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you.
Amen.
So the church does not replace Israel. And that's what this article is about, if you want copies later. But with the Jewish people, the church shares in the nourishing root, or the sap of the olive tree. And Romans 4 tells us that the promise of salvation is extended to all Abraham's offspring, not only to those who are of the Torah or the law, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham, who is father of us all. And I mentioned Ephesians 2 earlier today, and the Apostle Paul was speaking to Gentiles when he said, remember that you were separate from Messiah, excluded from citizenship in Israel, and foreigners to the covenants of promise, without hope and without God in the world. This is one of the saddest scriptures for me in the entire Bible. To be without hope and without God in the world. Is that sad? And when I think of my own Jewish family, I'm talking to someone today about my sisters, who are very secular. They're not interested in talking about God. I don't know what it is, what this veil that Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, there's this veil over their eyes. They just don't see, they don't care. They don't ask questions like I asked, why am I here? Where did I come from? And where am I going? I once asked my dad, what happens after you die? And he said, well, let me see. When I die, the worms are going to eat my body. I said, is that it? Yep, that's about it. Without hope and without God. Very sad. But notice the context. The context in Ephesians 2 is being separate from Messiah, was being excluded from citizenship in Israel. But Paul says, but now in Messiah Yeshua, in Christ Jesus, you who once were far away have been brought near by the blood of Messiah, by the blood of Christ. This is the mystery revealed. Now Paul talks about in chapter 3 that the Gentiles, through the gospel, are now heirs together with Israel. Members together of one body and sharers together in the promise of Christ Jesus, as this is Christian terminology here, right? So Gentiles, aren't you glad that you're now included in the gift of salvation? Because for thousands of years it was a Jewish thing. And now God is saying, you know, when the Messiah's come, and He's the Messiah, both Jew and Gentile. But the context is being part of Israel. And that's what's been lost. That's what the Messianic movement is trying to recapture. This Israel piece. And if you talk to people like Don Finto, and Eitan Shishkoff, and Dan Jester, and Asher Entrader, and Avner Bosky, some of the leading authors and leaders of the Messianic movement today, they'll tell you that Israel is the important piece in this revival that's taking place right now, this end-time revival. And if we miss Israel, you know how ancient, not ancient, historical revivals, there were people and leaders in churches who didn't receive it, and it went right over their head, like the Azusa revival that birthed Foursquare and AG church, and some of got churches, and there were a lot of churches that didn't get it, and those churches are dying today. Because the charismatic movement, this Pentecostal movement, this isn't just some fringe thing. You know, Foursquare has 70,000 churches. Did you know that? We're talking major influence in the world and growing rapidly all the time. That's why when Ted Vail came earlier here and told us, they want to embrace us because we are just another expression of what God is doing in the world today. And when I first met with Ted, he said, you know what? We really don't know what to do with you guys, you Messianics. He said, so we're going to put you in with the ethnic groups. So we're meeting at the same time with the Hispanic group, and I forget all the different ethnic groups we're meeting with now. And so we're going to say you're part of the ethnic part of Foursquare. I said, well, that's really not accurate. He said, well, why not? He says, because if you go to Italy or France or Germany or Rwanda or Ethiopia or even China or India, you'll find Jewish people there. Right. We're not just another ethnic group. He was scratching his head. Yeah, but we don't know what to do with you. So we're just going to put you with the ethnic groups for now. But he understands. He knows that there's something unique going on here. And we have a wonderful advocate with a cabinet member in Foursquare. And also Jack Hayford. Who's in his 80s now, but he wrote a wonderful letter. If you go by our booth, please pick up the letter from Jack Hayford, the endorsement letter. He wrote an article called Why Stand with Israel Today? It's for Christians. You can take it, you can get copies of it. It's on the website. I'll send you the PDF if you want to print it yourself. And the churches need to get this message. Why is important to stand with Israel today? Because we don't want to miss this next wave of revival. One last thing. Although I could go on for hours. I want to give Lev Shua some more time. And that is that Yeshua was not only the Son of God and Messiah, but He was a prophet. And He said
that many signs would occur before the end time. And one sign is unique to our day. Y'all know what that is? Jews are back in the land. Okay? And Jerusalem is once again under Jewish rule. Because he said in Luke chapter 21, verse 20, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. And this clearly speaks of the armies of Titus. 68 AD, finally 70 AD was when the temple fell. Tens of thousands of Jewish people died. Over 40,000 Jews were taken as slaves back to Italy, back to Rome. Did you know that Jewish slaves built the Colosseum in Rome? I couldn't even go into the Colosseum last time we were in Rome because of that. Others fled to the city, never to return. And the Jewish people would eventually be found in all the nations of the world. We call that the Great Dispersion, or the diaspora in Greek. And then he said, in Luke 21, and Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles. The Romans, the Byzantines, Muslims, Crusaders, Turks, and then the British. They all claimed sovereignty over the land of Israel. And then he said, Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until, and I underline until in my Bible, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. In other words, until the Gentiles are no longer ruling over Israel. When were the times of the Gentiles fulfilled? When did Gentiles cease control of Jerusalem? June 1967. 1897 years after 70 AD, when the state of Israel held off 6 invading Arab armies and recaptured the city of Jerusalem, and I can just hear the rabbi saying, we're inside the old city. We're inside the old city. What became known as Malchemet Sheshet Hayamim, the 6-day war. And then Yeshua continued in his prophecy in verse 28. He said this, when these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads because your redemption is drawing near. So these are signs of the end times. What else happened in 1967? It was the beginning of the Jesus movement. And from 67 to 77, roughly 10 years, I don't know what the numbers are. I'm going to say tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Jewish people came to know the Lord. My wife and I included. God was on the move. Like I said, we were planning a trip to India in April of 1970. What else happened in April of 1970? It was called the, wait a minute, Asbury College Revival in Wilmore, Kentucky, a Christian college. In April of 1970, a Christian student came up to the microphone during chapel on a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock at Asbury Christian College in Wilmore, Kentucky, and he confessed a sin. I don't know what it was. And then another student got up and confessed the sin. And then this confession started going on and repentance. That night, about midnight, the dean of the college called the president, who was in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. He said, "Sir, we have a problem." "What's the problem?" "The problem is chapel has not ended yet." "What do you mean chapel hasn't ended yet? It's midnight. What about all the classes?" "Well, that's the problem, sir. We don't know what to do." So he flies back to Wilmore, Kentucky, and he said it was like a magnet was like drawing him to the chapel. And he gets outside and he walks in the next day, on a Wednesday, and he's heard a voice say, "Don't go to your pew." He had a seat in the front pew. Voice said, "Sit in the back."
So the president of the college goes in the corner and sits and just watches. Chapel went on for 2 weeks, 24/7. And then Easter break came, back when we called it Easter break. And the students were flying home to different hometowns and went to their churches. Wherever they went, revival was breaking out. People were confessing their sins, getting filled with the Holy Spirit. April 1970, that was when we were planning our trip to Europe. And little did we know, just a few months later, we would be accepting our Messiah too in Switzerland. The beautiful thing is that God is still on the move today. And I'll give you one last verse from Romans 11. Romans 11, verses 12 and 15. Be two together. If the transgression of the Jewish people means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will their full inclusion bring? For if their rejection brought reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? That's a resurrection life. So when a Jew accepts their Messiah, there's something that takes place. I know very few Jews who are not zealots for God, because we experience resurrection life. Lord, thank you for what you're doing in the world today. Thank you for this little historical vignette, and I pray that we would be ever aware of what your Holy Spirit is doing. So Lord, we ask you to give us open doors to share your truth and your gospel, your good news that Messiah has come and he's coming back, and that we need to be prepared, hearts ready. We need to be repentant and believe the gospel. And maybe there's some of you here today who are just, you're tired, you need some refreshing. But Acts 3:19 says, repent and return to the Lord, so that times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord. Lord, we want to repent and return so that we can be refreshed. And when we're refreshed, we can share that refreshment with others. So that when people see us, when the lost see us, they'll see a vibrant, alive person who is refreshed and full of joy, because in your presence is fullness of joy. Hallelujah. In Yeshua's name. Left Shalom? Yes? Hallelujah. So Left Shalom also has some CDs in back. And what? Will you just tell about that?
I had a different program in my mind about coming up here. I thought we'd start with something real jubilant, but I think that we need to do a song called BenYa'akov. It's all in Hebrew, but the premise of it is exactly what Rabbi Hannon was talking about, and that is that someday we, the bride, are going to be reunited with the groom. And it's going to be a glorious time, but there's a lot we have to navigate through first before we get there. So I think we'll start with BenYa'akov, and then we'll just celebrate who we are. I celebrate every day who I am as a Jewish believer. I'm thankful to God that He saw fit to include me in this grand plan.
Hallelujah.
And I am thankful every single day. So I do have a slide on this one, but I told them, forget the slides, because we're just going to kind of play it by ear. But BenYa'akov was actually written by a Sabra, a man who was born in Israel. And when we asked if we could record it, he said, please don't do it in English. And I know why. I would never even dream of doing it in English, because it's expressed so beautifully in the language of Hebrew. But it basically says in English, Yeshua, precious Lord, blameless Lamb, arrayed in splendor. With one voice we call you, welcome, Emmanuel. And open our eyes and take our lives and purify your bride today. BenYa'akov, take your place on the throne of our hearts. taking the place that you rightfully earned and deserve on the throne of our hearts. We do not deserve your love, your grace, your mercy, or your salvation, and yet you freely give it to all nations. Thank you, God, that you have an order to things, and that order is the root first, and nourishment coming from what is put into that root. Thank you, God, that you have chosen the people that we now call the Jewish people. You have chosen them, and may they be, as Isaiah 49:6 says, a light to the nations. God, I pray that Christians would take their place, prop up, undergird, and seal that foundation that you have built in the Jewish people. Make the Jewish people jealous for what they have. And may we all walk together as one new man, not sameness, but the beauty of distinction shining through for who we are, under the covering and the blood of Yeshua our Messiah. Well, let's see here. Would you like to dance a little bit? Yes, anyone? Rebecca? Do you have a preference? No. She's like, no. All right. Would you like to do again, It Is Good and Roni Batzion? Yeah? Yes? Huh? You want to do something else?
We got so many songs.
Oh, we do. We have a ton.
You like Shalom?
We like Shalom, but we want to save Shalom and Hava Nagila for last. Okay? So let me go to my little list of songs here.
So,
Lord, we just did that one too.
So, officially, we're supposed to be done in about 10 minutes, but so
we can do Shalom and Hava Nagila. On one condition. Hava Nagila, you have to dance. Every single person in the room. Because Hava Nagila is not some Danish in a deli somewhere. Okay? The whole song talks about having joy because we're together and we're brothers and sisters. And it talks about rejoicing. And we do that with our feet, not just our lips. Deal? Okay, especially you guys in the purple shirts. I want to see you. So we're going to do Shalom first. Traditional Jewish greeting. Repeat after me. Shalom. Okay, you qualify. Here we go. Okay, Pam's brother, come on in. Your brother-in-law is over here on percussion. Nice to see you. You were at the Native American gathering and a guest speaker. We have actually ministered on the res down in New Mexico for the Navajo. Dine. Yeah, several times. They love Israel, and as a matter of fact, the Crow Nation has just adopted in their official policy support for Israel as a nation. Familia. Manny is married to his sister. All right, how many of you have heard of Hava Nagila? Okay. I guarantee you once we start, you've heard it.
Yeah.
How many of you have actually sung it before? Yeah? I expect you to sing out, because this song is vocal aerobics for me. We actually played it with Glenn Campbell one time, before Alzheimer's was really setting in. He was at our shul, we were doing a shoot for a documentary about the song, Hava Megillah. He came and played, I sang, and they said, why aren't you singing it? And he said, because it's too hard. I gotta move some stuff out of the way, because we get a little wild and crazy. By the way, how do you like Mark Keller on guitar here? John and Tisa on the bass. Stephen Keller on acoustic rhythm. And Maggie Matamoros on percussion. And all the way from South Korea, we had Sarah Tomey here, but she had to go. She is 4.5 months pregnant, and she's been in bed for the last month. She has a risky pregnancy, so this is her first time out, and we are so glad to have her. I'm stalling because this song is so hard. Here we go. Oh wait, I see 2 doors here, by the way, which means you can go out that door and come back in. How about that?
We need everybody.